This lesson is about the law of cosines. It's a little bit more complicated than the law of sines, so we only want to use this one if we have to. This is our equation that we're going to use down here. Notice that that's a lot to memorize. The setup for this, where we get our a's and b's, will be the same as we did with the sine rule, where we put our angle b across from side b, our angle c across from angle c. Our sides are lowercase, our angles are uppercase, and so we're thinking about opposites. Now the book's going to give it to you with 3 different formulas, so we're thinking about each sign. But it's okay to think about it as just one, as long as we think about this as whatever side that we're looking for, it's opposite the angle that we have. Or if we're looking for the angle, it's going to be opposite of the side that we have. So we need to have that first of all, that the side and angle are across from each other. Then the B and C fill in the other parts of this. So for our formula, we could think about it this way, where we just leave a lot of blanks. A number squared, and that's going to be opposite of the angle that we're looking at. So depending on what we have. In this case, we have a 60-degree angle, so that's going to go inside of cosine. Now the A, notice, is across from that 60-degree angle, so I'm going to put that in over here. I don't know what that is, that's my variable. Now the other sides, the 10 and the 8, are going to fill in the other parts. It doesn't matter what order, whether I write 10 plus 8 or 8 plus 10. Same thing here. 10 times 8 would be the same as 8 times 10, so the order doesn't really matter. So to work this out, we're going to get a squared equals 100 plus 64 minus 160 cosine of 60. Next we would add the parts. We get 164 minus 160 cosine of 60. Now be very careful here. A lot of students will mess up here. They'll make the mistake of trying to subtract 164 minus 160. But notice this is one group. This is 160 times the cosine of 60, so we have to do the multiplication before we can do the subtraction, which means this is going to give us 164 minus 160 times the cosine of 60, which is 0.5. We would then have 164 minus 80, which would then give us a squared is equal to 84. And so a would be equal to the square root of 84. Now that's going to come to about 9.2. And usually for the sides, they'll ask us to round to the nearest tenth. And so that would be our answer for A. And we can also use the law of cosines to find the measure of angles. Notice here I don't have any angles, and we're asked to find the measure of angle R. So it's very important to start out by noticing what we're looking for. We're looking for R. That's our only angle, so that goes inside of our cosine. The important thing at this point is to remember what is opposite of that. So the 23 is opposite of R, so I'm going to write that in over here, opposite of the angle R. I can now go back and fill in the other sides. We've got a 37 and 18. Those just fill in the other places. It doesn't matter what order, again, because 18 times 17 is the same as 37 times 18. So either order would be fine there. We would then go through and simplify everything, which is going to give me 529, 324 plus 1369, and 1332 cosine of R. Notice we won't be able to simplify this for cosine of R. We need to solve this whole equation for R. Next thing we'll do is we'll do some addition here, which will give us 1693. Again, do not subtract. This is all one group here because this is multiplication here. Which means for our next step, we're going to need to subtract the 1693 away from both sides. That's going to give us a negative number. Now it's important to be careful with our negative signs because a positive cosine and a negative cosine are going to give us different answers, and it's important to get the correct one. In this problem here, when I divide the 1164 by 1332, and remember again, I'm dividing by a negative number here, so it's going to give me a positive number. It will simplify to 97 over 11, or you could use a decimal as long as you're using up to 4 decimal places. Gives you the cosine of R. To solve this then, we would use the inverse of cosine and plug that whole fraction in there, 97 over 111. That's going to come to about 29 degrees. Now for this part, I want you to pause your recorder and try to set them up. Just plug the numbers into the equation. You don't have to solve it. You might want to draw the triangles first to see what you have. Okay, so here we can check our answers. Notice in the first one when I set it up, D was across from angle D, which was given to us. So I started by putting the 49 in, and I put the D across from that. And then the other sides, the 19 and 28, I just filled in the other spots. For the next one, we were looking for angle B, so I started by putting the angle B in there. And then judging on our picture, I noticed that 14 is across from B, so it also needs to be across from that in the formula, and I plug in the other parts as we go. Okay, sometimes when we look at a triangle, they don't tell us whether we should use sine rule or cosine rule. We want to make a decision. The law of sines is something we want to use because it's easier, and we'll always use it if we have an angle and the side opposite of it. So if we have a matching pair and any other part, we'll be able to use the law of sines. We're going to use the cosine rule when we don't have a matching part. We always want to look for the simplest approach. Now looking at this one, they say to solve the triangle, which means we need to have every side and every angle. Now looking at it first, we want to decide, can I use the law of sines? Looking at this angle where it is, this is the only angle I'm given, so I can't find any other angles right now by subtracting from 180 or any other method. So the only choice I have is to look across from that. I don't have a matching pair there, so I have to use the law of cosines. I'm going to start with this angle that I do have, and it is across from side K. Plug in the other sides that I have, and what I would do really is just plug this in as K is equal to the square root of all of this, just like I did right here. Then I will get an answer of 14.2416. Still need to find angles L and M. I can now use the law of sines. Start with angle M here. If we put that over 14, because M is across from 14, and then I want to compare it to the pair that I have. So the sine of 51 over the 14.24, and then using the inverse sine. Now again, I can just plug this into my calculator just like that. Now notice as I do this, I need to be careful with parentheses and grouping symbols to make sure everything's inside of my inverse sine here. Round it to the nearest degree, I'm going to say this is about 50 degrees, which I can label up here, 50 degrees. And then I should also be able to find L because these three angles are going to add up to 180 degrees. If I subtract that from 180, I'm left with 79 degrees. My answer then is to list the missing parts. And so our answer would be all three of these parts. One last note, when we're solving a triangle, if it asks us to do that and we're given three sides, we could really start with any angle. The problem is when we use the law of sines, we might have a problem if there's an obtuse angle. Now the obtuse angle will always be across from the largest side. Start with the angle across from the largest side and use the law of cosine with that. Then when we move on to the next step, just like this one, we then use the law of sines. We don't have to worry about having that problem.